What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Accelerate Your Life podcast. I hope you guys are having a great week so far. We've got an exciting guest episode for you guys today. I am joined once again by Coach Nick, one of our EA coaches. Hello, how are you doing, Coach Nick?
Hi, happy Friday. Doing
Happy
good.
Friday. Yes, it is. I guess it's a Thursday when you guys are hearing this, but we're recording this a little bit early for you. It is a Friday, so we're getting ready for the weekend. But this is exciting because this is time number 2 on the podcast. I think you're probably our only, I think Megan's been on twice, so and maybe that's it. So you're our second recurring guest, which also
Wow, honored.
I heard a fun fact the other day. I heard a fun fact the other day that like most like 90% of podcasts don't get past episode 8. And this is
Wow.
episode like 49. We've had enough to have 2 of you guys on twice. So I think that's pretty cool. I'm
That's
happy.
awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, and it's great content, so we love it.
Yay. And this one's going to be a great one too. We're going to be talking a lot about warming up and kind of get Coach Nick's expertise on, is that an overrated or underrated part of training? If it is, underrated, what does that need to really look like to get the most out of your workout? So we're going to be diving into into that today. But before I do, you guys know that whenever we have a guest, I love to ask one question, which I've asked you before last time you were here, but it's been a few months. Things have changed. And this question's all about like in this moment. So, what is one thing that you love about life right now?
Ooh, this is a good one. Honestly, this probably was like the same answer I gave you last time, but it still definitely is just like more further reinforced. Is just like I feel like I'm just at a point in life right now where I am like doing all the things I want to be doing. Like being a coach with the A, I love everybody that I get to support. I love the other coaches. You guys are the best. Being at the Pilates studio and being able to move my body. I've been like pushing a lot in the gym and hitting PRs and stuff. So just like
Yeah.
feeling like I'm doing the things that I like put out in the universe.
I love that. Like you're just in your groove. The only thing
Yes.
missing is that you don't live in Austin.
The only thing missing is I don't
We
live
were
in
just before we hit record, I was on my little trek of trying to convince Coach Nick to move to Austin. One day, maybe one day.
maybe.
But cool. All right. Well, we are chatting, like I said, all things warming up. We've done a couple episodes actually on the importance of strength training in and of itself. And I do have my notes ready this time, my Spark notes. If you guys want to go back to those, episode 12, I did a Fast Fit Facts episode of why my babes should bodybuild, why bodybuilding, why strength training specifically is so crucial for women. And we've done an episode on the importance of having strategic programming within that bodybuilding, right? And that was episode 39 with Kayla Diamond, all about tailored training. But we have not talked about the importance of the predecessor of both of these things, which is the actual warm up before we get into that. So that's really what I want to focus on today. And before we get into that, though, I always like kind of for anyone who's speaking on a subject to give us a little bit of background of like what kind of gives you the right. So I would love to know, and obviously I know it, but share with our listeners, what's your background when it comes to exercise programming? Let's start there. What's your background, like credential wise, when it comes to, yeah, sorry, not exercise programming, but like, I mean, I guess it falls into that, but
Yeah.
mobility, training, warming up, all of that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I do have my NASM CPT, so I've been programming workouts for a very long time. Also as a Pilates instructor, I've been doing that for about 10 years. So done a lot of programming, and I feel like in that space, that kind of got me more into mobility and stretching because a lot of Pilates foundation is based on that. And also corrective movement. We work with, a lot of people coming out of PT or coming out of injuries that need that more gentle support and need to work their way back up. Most recently, I did a weekend course. It's called Pain-Free Performance Specialization Certification. And basically, what the premise of the course was a 2 day. It was in person, super, super fun, really cool to be able to be hands-on. But really, we learned a lot about number one, the importance of warming up and like what the components of the warm up should look like, and a pathway to making it so easy and so time effective, which I think is like one of the main hurdles of warming
Mhm.
up. And then also just from more of a coaching perspective, like how to assess either, with somebody in person or for us, online coaches, like how to look at videos and be able to assess like what's actually going on to help people perform pain free and to work through challenges, to work through tightness, mobility issues, strengthening issues, stability issues, and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that event is what really kind of brought us to doing this podcast episode because I know so something cool we do with the EA coaches is once a month a coach always like presents on something that's maybe more in their wheelhouse. They have a little bit more expertise in than maybe some of the other coaches on one of our coaches meetings, and they teach the other coaches. And so with after Coach Nick went to this event, she brought it all to us, and we all loved this presentation. We thought it was so fascinating. And this was something as a company like we helped send her to because we knew we needed a little bit more of this expertise with our clients. But curious for you, because I know you brought this to me, saying,
Mhm,
"Hey, I want to go to this. Is this something that I can use my, educational
mhm.
stipend towards?" And so I'm curious for you, like what made this you so drawn to this? Like, had you noticed a really missing gap of this with people and like the need for corrective exercise
Yeah.
across the board? Yeah, what was kind of your draw to it?
Yeah, I would say like in my own personal journey for the past year, I just personally was really diving in on my own mobility. I knew that it was something that I had honestly just like avoided for so long. Like I knew I was tight. I knew I wasn't doing the right things. I wasn't warming up for a long time. And so over this past year, I've really been doing a lot of research just on my own. And then most recently, my husband has been dealing with a lot of pain and injuries. He's had some surgeries and things like that. So he's been working with some PTs, and that kind of got me interested too to be able to help him and support him. But I definitely think, just within coaching our clients, that it's an area that can sometimes get overlooked, and I do
Mhm.
get a lot of questions about it.
Yeah,
And whenever I bring up with certain clients, like, hey, are you doing any mobility work? Are you doing any stretching, things like that? And they're like, no, but I would love to learn more.
yeah.
So I definitely feel like it's something that comes up pretty
For
frequently.
sure, and I would imagine, like, I even know for myself, a big hurdle to if you were to be like, "Well, why aren't you?" It's like, "What do I do?" For some reason, I mean, not for some reason, I know why. Obviously, the actual working out and, like, that's more glamorous and people wanna like, it's the sexy, it has the appeal, right? Because you can definitively see what it ends up getting you in the long run, so people tend to learn, "Oh, here's what a squat is, here's what a shoulder press is," but, like, nobody's kind of teaching, as common knowledge, like, what a warm up is.
Yep.
Um, so that kind of brings me to my one of my first big questions here is like, what is warming up? Like what constitutes warming up? What does that even mean?
Yeah, yeah. So I think there's a few different aspects of warming up. The first piece, which is like the most obvious piece, is like quite literally warming up your body, right? Like when we're just stagnant, we're standing, we're not doing anything, our muscles aren't warm, our joints are not lubricated yet, right? They're not moving smoothly. So, like from a physiological standpoint, and the most obvious, it's just literally getting yourself ready to move. From more of a neurological standpoint, especially if you are trying to improve your form or hit PRs or whatever it might be, warming up is also a great way to neurologically get your body aware of how it needs to move. And like just honestly, like throwing yourself under, 100-pound, barbell and going to squat without any like predecessor to it of like, how is my body even moving? You're just setting yourself up for like not the most successful
Mhm.
lift. So it's definitely both physiological, but then very mindset, neurological, just like getting everything engaged together.
Totally. Why is it specifically so crucial? I know you talked about you're not setting yourself up for success for, putting load on your back if you're not
Yeah.
literally warming up the body, going through those movements without load. Like what's going on a more in-depth level that makes that so crucial to the difference between like setting up for yourself for success or not?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So I think with kind of setting yourself up for success, like for instance, again, like let's just use a squat because everybody kind of knows what a
Yeah.
squat is. It's a pretty basic exercise, but like you might think of it as like, oh, I do squats all the time, but just and we see this when we review form videos and things that like a slight shift back of the hips or a slight, you know, tilt in of the knees, things like that can have a huge impact on how you feel, on like your risk of injury, right? And when we're just going straight into exercise with load and we're not looking at understanding how our body actually feels without the
Mhm.
load, you're going to start to like, we call it like muscle memory, right? It's not really muscle memory, but your body's just going to start to naturally go that way. And the more you add weight, the more you progress it with that bad pattern,
Right.
it's going to be harder to undo. So when we pull back to the warm up And we start doing exercises like dead bugs, like bird dogs, right? Stabilization, really connecting into your core, connecting into your alignment, into your balance. Your body and your mind both understand this is how I need to move my body.
Mhm.
This is what feels good on my hip placement. This is where my foot placement feels good. And there's nothing to knock like warm up sets, right? Like doing, before, like let's say you are doing a heavy lift, going in and doing a couple light, a couple reps on a light load is good too and part of it. But it's really just like making that connection so that we're
Yeah.
doing the correction. Like the corrective movement needs to be before the load,
Yeah.
basically, to sum it up.
I think that's a really good, like, yeah, point to make is because that's something I truly was a fault of mine for years was just thinking doing the movement that I was about to do with little or no load was the warm up. And again, like you said, it's part of it. But if you haven't corrected the movement pattern prior, your body's now like it's always going to want to take the path of least resistance, right? So, like, if you just warmed up with a little bit of an incorrect postural deviation, like that's where your body it's making that postural deviation because currently it's the path of least resistance, right? There's a reason why your body's like taking that. And if you're
Right.
doing that, it's gonna why would it go any different or take a harder path when you actually have load on you? So like that prior step of correcting whatever that deviation is and yeah, making sure that you are training your body to strengthen in a way so now that path with the correct way is actually the path of like least
Exactly.
resistance, but that takes time.
Yeah.
um Okay, so and so I think we can obviously state that from that like warming up is important. Now, the
Yes.
way just from your opinion being a coach, seeing typical like lifestyle clients and how they think about warming up, whether they do or don't, do you feel like in the general like day and age now warming up is overrated or underrated for what it really should be?
I definitely think, okay, I have two parts to this answer. I think it is very underrated. I think people do not value it enough. I think people overthink it. And that was
Okay.
something that I definitely like was one of my big takeaways, I think, from doing this training course was that it doesn't have to be a lot. You just have to make sure you're doing it. Like it can literally take you 2 to 3 minutes if you're crunched for time. I would rather you do those 2 to 3 movements, and we can kind of talk about that in a bit, but then just skip it. And I think a lot of people lean in a lot on like I'm just gonna walk on the treadmill for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like part of it, right? But is that really enough to keep you safe and to keep you progressing?
Okay, I like that answer. I think that's good. I think yeah, people do tend to overthink it, which is so it's like anything else. People overthink it so they're like, "Oh, I'm overwhelmed, so I'm just not going to do it
No,
at all." And it's like that's
exactly.
worse than just like simplifying it down and maybe it's not
Right.
perfect, but at least you do something. But on that side of things, on like the strategy behind warming up, it's kind of like how I did in that episode I mentioned where I talked about with Kayla Diamond the importance of strategic programming. How important do you think strategy behind the actual warm up itself is? Or do you feel like just something is better than nothing?
I do think that something is better than nothing, but I think for people that are either like really struggling a lot with like pretty significant imbalances, or for people that are wanting to like lift heavy, right? Because that's when we can really open ourselves up for risk. I think the strategy behind it, it's just like I feel like it's the same with like like the actual workout programming, right? It's like when you're first getting started, like yeah, as long as you're just getting in the gym
Totally.
and moving your body, you're gonna feel different, right? But as you get more advanced, you need more strategy
Yeah.
behind it. You're gonna get the same. So I feel like it's almost like the same path.
That's a good comparison, and that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, well now like we've kind of deduced that warming up important, strategy behind it gets more important as you go. I think you had a lot of amazing takeaways from this event that you did go to. So this was kind of the main part we wanted to do in the podcast is bring to you guys like, okay, well now how should it look? Like let's learn to not overthink it. What does warming up need to look like? If you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you won't be able to see. We're going to share our screen here. You won't be able to see this. So I would highly recommend going and watching on YouTube. But it should still make sense from just an auditory perspective too. But we are, if you kind of hear us referencing it, we are going to share a screen because again, this is kind of the presentation that Coach Nick even went over with our REA coaches. So you guys are going to get kind of the inside, like intellectual nitty gritty scoop here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and Yeah, just kind of tell us a little bit about like what you learned at this event when it came to warming up, and what you think like a general person should take away when now coming away from this podcast episode wanting to get in the gym and doing their warm up. So I'll let you
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, for sure. So I think like, so what we have up on screen here for our audio listeners is basically the structure that I learned in my training, which is a 6-phase dynamic warm-up sequence. And within these 6 phases, we go through release work, we go through stretching, we go through corrective, stability, working through patterns, and even like central nervous system regulation. And so I think where again, like for somebody who's beginner, maybe like for their first warm up or two, like it doesn't need to be this involved. But for somebody that's a little bit more advanced in the gym, I think this is a really good structure to be following to make sure you hit all of the key components. And I think one of the big takeaways, like at a very base level, that really surprised me was the use of the warm up for central nervous system regulation before your workout, which like, we all talk about, HIIT workouts are really taxing on our central nervous system, or, things like yoga are not, so we think about it, but we don't think about it with a warm up. So with this 6-phase warm up sequence, and this is probably my favorite part of the whole thing and something that I am like ride or die on this forever, like it's really changed my own training, is self myofascial release or foam rolling. Basically, there's other methodologies, but mostly foam rolling. The intent of that is when we're going into our workouts, most of us in our culture are busy. Like we're not just like strolling into a workout, totally chill, plenty of time. Like usually we're trying to squeeze it in. We got things on our mind. Taking literally 60 seconds to foam roll not only helps you to build awareness of where you might be feeling pain, where you might be feeling tightness, where you might be feeling not tightness and feeling really good, it helps us to bring our central nervous system down. If you don't bring your central nervous system down, you're not really focused on what you're doing, and you're not going to get as much of a benefit out of, your body, especially as we move into the kind of more the corrective work here. So that was really interesting. And then at the end of this 6-phase warm-up sequence, we actually do a little bit more of active work where we're doing squat jumps or jump lunges or things that are a little bit more active, with the main goal of actually bringing your central nervous system back up. So it's kind of like we bring you down, we get you really connected to your body in the warm-up, and then right before you're about to go actually do your lifts, we're going to like hype you back up again. And that was, I found like very interesting and something that I would have never tied to warming up. Just like the mindset connection to, mindset's my thing. So I found that like super interesting. But yeah, so just kind of walking through again, the 6 pieces of the dynamic warm-up sequence are going to be self myofascial release, which is basically foam rolling, biphasic positional stretching, so getting in some dynamic stretching. We always want to be moving through, and that could be like a hip flexor, like a kneeling hip flexor stretch. It can be, anything like just even like doing like some body like weight squats is totally fine. Any kind of like, so like lying hamstring leg circles, chest opener stretches, things like that. So it doesn't have to be fancy. One movement, 30 seconds a piece, take a few seconds, get back into it for 30 seconds and move on. Like this doesn't have to be long. Then we move into the corrective based movements, right? And our corrective based movements, I'm just gonna pull up my screen here, make sure I'm speaking to all this correctly. Is that's where we're getting into like what I mentioned, like dead bugs, bird dogs, like anything like quadruped. And the cool thing about these is, if you guys are familiar with like dead bugs or bird dogs, right? You're in like an all fours position, either prone or supine on your back, or, facing down. And the cool thing is you can progress these for anybody. So whether you're just getting started and you've never done a dead bug in your life, or you're very advanced, by adding, are we just holding the position? Are we doing a toe drag behind? Are we lifting the leg? Are we lifting an opposite arm and leg, right? And so it's really easy to progress these movements, but you are inherently going to feel where your imbalances are while you are doing these. And that's where that like really stimulates that. And again, just like tying back to my background, like I literally like every Pilates class I teach, we're doing some kind of variation of a dead bug or a bird dog, because it's just like, it's super valuable for sure. Um, and then from there, you want to do more stability work, right? Doing glute bridges is going to help you to stabilize through the hips, through the glutes. Doing banded pull aparts, we're stabilizing through the shoulders and through the back. And one interesting thing is like stability usually happens in the posterior chain. So just something to think about there. It's a lot of glute work. We tend to stabilize from the back, which is interesting. The fifth part is going to be your foundational pattern development. So that's like, for example, if you're on squat day, right? Doing some squats is going to help you learn what your body needs to do. If you're doing more lunge heavy pattern, right? You're going to be doing like reverse lunges, just body weight, nothing taxing, but just start getting your body used to it. If you're on a press day, right? Doing some push-ups, even if they're on incline, even if they're on your knees, it's not meant to be like taxing. It's just meant to get your body ready for the movement. And then again, the last piece is going to be that like upregulation of the central nervous system, like literally 60 seconds, jump squats, side plank hip thrusts, anything that you can do just to get your heart rate up. And that's really just like, it's literally meant to hype you up, to get
Yeah.
ready for the workout, which I think is like super cool to include in a workout or in a warm up. And like last little thing on this is just that as you like a lot of these pieces, especially the corrective based movement, you might get to a point where you don't need corrective based movement. Like that's the goal of corrective based movements. Like you don't want to be doing these forever. Ultimately, you're correcting your patterns and you're good. So this list, while it might seem long at first, can definitely start to get whittled down as you work through it. So now like when I'm using this for myself, like I'm only hitting maybe like 3 or 4 of these and I can crank out my warm up in like 4 minutes, but I
Yeah.
feel really good getting into it.
I think what was cool about this, and kind of we already talked about how oftentimes a lot of us for warm-ups just go to the movement that we're about to do with little to no load, and how we are, notice that that's not always the best, because if you are not correcting a pattern before that, that's what you're getting used to. But you have that within here. That's what number 5 is, really the foundational pattern development, is moving through
Correct.
the movement. But notice how there's 4 things before that to, prime your body to actually be able to go through that movement correctly and set yourself up for that performance correctly. And I think that was a big takeaway for me here when we were first going over this, is how many things there are prior to that. And that's like much more of an ending part of the warm up. So that was a big
Yeah.
take. And you said for you, you're taking about 4 minutes. When you said if from the beginning, if somebody was doing all 6 of these things, how much time is it taken from start to finish?
From start to finish, this should not take more than 12 minutes.
Okay.
You want to think about for each one of these about 2 minutes total. These are more, you want to think of them more as like time-based versus rep-based. So one of the big foundations also of what we learned in this course is that we are our strongest when our trunk is engaged, right? Everybody talks about core strength, but like, what does that really mean, right? And so having great alignment through your body is again how we keep ourselves safe, pain-free, but where we're our strongest. And so working working through this, it's like as long as you're being really effective with what you're doing, and even like when you're stretching, are you bracing your core? Are you keeping really good alignment? You can do these for 30 seconds and you're going to get value out of it. You don't have to be like, I think people think like, oh, my workout's already an hour, 45 minutes. I don't have time. So like literally, I would say for like the foam rolling aspect, the first one, doing 30 seconds on, one part of your body. If you want have to do both sides, right? Do 30 seconds on each side and you're good to go. Move on to the next thing. Like it 1 to 2 minutes tops on each
Yeah.
of these.
Yeah. And it's again an eye opener for me. Like I'm probably taking 8 to 10 minutes in my warm up, but there's not as much purpose behind it, right? So this is really, I think, brings purpose and strategy to it. So that's what I love about it. So those are the 6 kind of parts of it. And maybe move this forward to you because I know there was more you wanted to add.
Yeah. So yeah, this for those of you on the Spotify and Apple, we're looking at our next slide here. That just kind of walks through some of the exercises I mentioned. So you can see here where it says like 1 to 2 minutes per each exercise. And again, like some of the things that might drop out is doing the corrective work. Like if you feel like you've gotten to a really good point, you're pain free, you're getting good range of motion, right? You might not have to spend that much time there. One really interesting thing that was a good takeaway. Again, I'm like really hot on the foam rolling right now, but you don't have to specifically foam roll. They don't recommend specifically foam rolling like specific muscles, it's regions. So I used to think very much like, okay, I'm gonna foam roll my glutes, I'm gonna foam roll my quads, and it's more like, no, it's like, let me visit this whole area of like my hip, upper leg, and just kind of move around. And one really cool takeaway that I got from it, is that while yes, foam rolling is like, again, physiologically like warming up the muscle a little bit, loosening things up, it's also bringing your awareness to where you're feeling tightness or to where you might need to strengthen or you might need to loosen things up a lot. So for me, going in with that mindset of it, I feel like I'm very tuned in now when I'm foam rolling of like, ooh, that felt like I felt something there. That was interesting, and kind of like approaching it. And again, like the main purpose of this course was actually for more pain management, right? And so we talked a lot about pain. And I think foam rolling is a really good foundation for identifying where you might
Yeah.
be feeling things. And Mal, if you can slide to the
Yeah.
last slide, I threw up a little graphic. I actually didn't even go over this with the coaches, but I threw
Oh,
this in here because I wanted to go over it.
hold on. To this one? No, this.
This one. So something that we talked about that I thought was really interesting and really made a ton of sense for me. So anterior pelvic tilt, right? For those of you that's like booty out, kind of hips tilted down to the front, right? And this is a very common pattern that we see,
I was gonna
especially
say, if you don't know what it is, you probably have it.
you probably have it. Yeah, exactly. It's a very, very common scenario, right? And a lot of people will feel back pain, they'll feel pain in the back of their leg, like all sorts of things come from it. And it was interesting the way that they explained this when we were going over assessments and things like that is that inherently when someone says, oh, my low back hurts, right? So in this scenario, you'll see that because like the hips are tilted forward, the low back muscles are very compressed. But what's also happening is the hamstrings are very stretched out. And the reason that there's this tilt is because there's also tightness through the hips and the quads, right? It's pulling the hips forward and down. And so while you might be feeling all of the pain in the back of your body, it might not be because you're tight in the back of your body. So like the immediate thing is like if someone's having hamstring pain or they're having low back pain, they might think like, oh, I need to mobilize this. I need to loosen it up.
Opposite.
No, you're actually in pain because you're locked. And the way they talked about it was this locking mechanism. The front of the hips here and the quad are locked, which is forcing you to be locked through the back in the stretched position.
Yeah.
And so when I saw this, I was like, this just blew my mind. I was like, I never thought about it in that way, and their big thing was like not chasing pain. So I guess I bring this up specifically because I think a lot of times what I'll hear from clients when they are experiencing pain is like, oh, well, this hurts, so we need to work on this. And I think as coaches, and something that they were really big on in my training was saying, don't like, it basically was like, don't chase the pain.
Mm-hmm.
Just because somebody says they have pain in one particular part of their body, you've got to look all around,
Totally.
and I think that's like a really interesting kind of concept to
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've had some sort of pain, some sort of injury. I've went to the, sports doctor or whatever, and
yeah,
you come to find out it's like my shoulder pain's coming from my core, like, or the way you
yeah,
stand. Or I know right now I've had some foot pain just from, I think, some overactivity, but it's not my foot. I can tell, I know because of my knowledge, but it's coming from my knee. It's coming from having that, I definitely have a little bit more of that. I want to say the word like valgus. I don't know if I'm using the right
yeah,
language, but
yeah, yeah, yeah,
the
with the
knee
knees,
inversion.
yeah,
Yeah, knee
yeah,
inversion.
yeah.
When I squat, when I even leg press, when I do anything heavy, that's something I need to correct. I know I have that knee inversion. And I think a lot of that overuse has caused a tendon to be tight, and I can feel it down in my foot. But the pain is showing up in my foot. But if I just think to myself, like if I didn't have better knowledge, I'd probably think, oh, it's my foot. Let me roll out my foot. Let me do whatever. Let me rest my foot. But it's my knee, And so having that knowledge of how the body's all uh, intertwined, and how one thing being tight, like it is a chain. It is all connected.
It is,
So
yeah, yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because that actually brings up another thing that I had written down in my notes to bring up on this, is that what level of I feel like mobility right now is like just very it's starting to get some like more hype in the community and people
yeah.
are starting to pay attention and like, I follow a lot of people on social media and stuff that are like super, mobility gurus, but I think there needs to be an understanding too of like how mobile do you have to be? How perfect does your form have to be in order to be good enough? And obviously it's very glamorous to have like a super low squat and have different things going on. And like admittedly, like myself, like I've been working on my squat depth for a while now. And every time I post a video on social media, people are like, oh my God, your squats are so low. And I'm like, yeah, when I went to this course and we actually assessed like our stance and our depth and things like that, I actually came to find out that I was actually squatting a little lower than my body actually naturally
Mhm.
wants me to go. And so I've now, since that training, have actually pulled my range of motion up a little bit. And
Yeah.
sometimes I get sad and I'm like, oh, I wish I could like, and like I'll throw in like a low one just for kicks. But I think there's also needs to be an understanding. And so for when you talk about like knee valgus, so they're actually like when you're squatting heavy there actually is a level where knee valgus to a certain extent is okay. Like if you have heavy load, your knees naturally, in order to activate our adductors, will naturally pull your knees in a little bit, right? So I think it's an understanding and an awareness of like how bad is this? And
Yeah.
that's where like working with a coach, sending form
Right.
videos, love
Right.
form videos because it can look a little bit different for
Yeah.
everybody and it's really like a very personal experience of just understanding your body and like where is
Yeah.
the right place for you, you
Yes.
know?
I mean, and on that note, this is getting away from like warm ups, but yes, I had a very similar experience myself with squatting. Was it's knowing that everybody's biomechanics are so different, and that is why this like one set size fits all of anything just does not work. Like on squats specifically, a common phrase you've probably heard is like ass to grass, like have full range of motion, have full
Yeah.
mobility. And I remember like trying to do that, and I eventually learned after having like my own coach and sending form videos that so I have very long legs, I have very long femurs. If
Yeah.
I do that, like I'm getting the very like a rounded spine. I'm getting kind of that hip wing. And that's not because I have bad form. It's just because my body's only way to get that low is to compensate that way. And no matter
Yeah.
what I do, I'm not going to be able to fix that if I want to go that low. So that is not the range of motion my body is built to go. And so I had to come to realize like, oh wait, Astagrass, like it's a trendy thing to say, but actually that's not the most optimal for everybody. For some it is. Some people the way they're built, and like that is, the depth that they should go. But if I go that depth, I'm losing all of my glute tension. Like other things are taking over. And so I'm not actually like strength training my glutes. I'm losing all the tension there. So it's not serving the purpose I want. And it's also going to probably hurt my low back. So for me to actually have better glute tension, I should not go that deep. And so it's you have to learn your body's biomechanics.
100%.
So
100%. Yeah, it's
let's
super
jump on that.
important. I feel like people see things on Instagram and they compare themselves. And so this is
Yes.
like a PSA, don't compare yourself, guys. We all are built differently. And like, if you're a power lifter or you're doing some kind of competition, yes, maybe you have to have that form. But if you're just
Yeah.
lifestyle, you're just trying to do good by your body, is it worth it? Right?
Right.
Is it worth putting your body into these positions that might not be optimal? Probably not.
Yeah. Well, I think like in some ways in the sense comparing can be okay when you know which parts you should be comparing. So like
Sure.
in a squat, what's going to be, like correct across the board is, not having that hip wink or whatever, right? Like
Right.
keeping a flat neutral spine. But where everybody is able to keep that flat neutral spine, that's what's different. So like saying,
Totally
oh,
different.
he went all the like he only was 2 inches off the ground. Like I need to be like that. No, what you need to be looking at is like where's that person's spine? Where's your spine? Like those are, you have to understand the parts that you're comparing. Right.
Exactly. That's a huge point. I totally agree. I
Yeah.
totally agree.
Well, I think this is so great. I know we're kind of even starting to move away from the mobility side of things, but like all of the mobility, the warming up, all of that allows you to, I think, be more in tune with your body and begin to like be in the right corrective spots to eventually learn that and like where your biomechanics
Yeah.
lie.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that we didn't get to that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I think the last thing is just like let's quickly just like run through like what this actually looks like. So if you go one slide back, one, yep, there we go. That one. So one last little like nugget for you guys that I learned was that a lot of our mobility issues actually come from our thoracic spine, which is going to be kind of like the mid to upper trunk area of our body. And I feel like what they like harped on so much was that like even on a deadlift day or a squat day, you still need to have mobility through the upper, like to hold a bar on your back, you need to be able to open up and have that stability. So what we have here, again, for my audio people, I'll kind of walk you through, but what this might look like for a warm up might look like just through, the actual exercises. So this is a thoracic spine mobility program. You would do 1 to 2 minutes of foam rolling through your upper back, just kind of loosening up there. A TRX lat stretch. So basically just holding onto your TRX handles and just sitting your hips back and getting that nice like stretch with the arms overhead, elbows right outside the ears. Again, 1 to 2 minutes, doesn't need to be long. Taking it down to a quadruped T-spine rotation. So think about like just being in quadruped, hands under the shoulders, knees under the hips, hand behind the head, and we're just rotating up, but that's going to start to challenge our alignment a little bit there, right? And then taking it to some pull aparts, band pull aparts, just grabbing a nice long band in your hands, pulling it apart, opening up through the chest, squeezing the shoulder blades, building that stability. We go into kind of the banded lat prayer. So that's where we're starting to press down, really activate the lats, getting them ready for movement. And then just some good old jumping jacks, like OG, right? Like
Yeah.
nothing complicated here,
PE
but
class, elementary school PE
yeah,
class.
right. Exactly. Like jazz. I always think like jazzercise, fun times. Yeah, just getting some jumping jacks. So for those of you on YouTube, you guys can look at this and use it. It's a great program for upper and lower body days. And remember, it doesn't have to take a long time. It's super important. So get your workouts in, friends, your warm-ups.
Amazing. I love it. I mean, we took this and we were all like, we're going to start doing this. Transparently, I still need to start doing this. I need to be better, but I have the same mindset. I get it of like, oh, I want to just like get to the lifting, but I
Mhm.
can tell like 7 years into this now, like I do not feel the way I did when I first started. And I think that it's so, 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 so important. So I hope that you guys listening like take some of this away. Again, it doesn't have to be complicated. If you are feeling like it was a lot of just words, I would definitely highly go recommend looking at the YouTube, which is linked in the show notes as far as the channel and where you can find that. But yeah, thanks, Coach Nick. I think this was incredible. Anything else you
Yeah.
want to add?
No, I mean, I think just get your warm-ups in, folks, even if it's
Warm
like a
up.
little bit of foam rolling and you can do like a couple bird dogs or dead bugs, like just start there. You will feel the difference. Like I cannot work out anymore without like a proper warm-up at this point. Like my body will not allow it. So like I promise, give it a
It's
shot.
worth it. Give it a
Give it
shot.
a
Cool.
shot. It'll feel good.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, thanks for coming on. I'm sure we'll have you on for our third time
Yeah,
again here in the
maybe,
upcoming
maybe.
future. But I hope you guys all have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.